All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for coming. So we have the fourth edition of the IMSC in Conversation series today. So we have had so far science journalist, photographer, epidemiology consultant, and today we are going to have a poet. So Fiona, of course, needs no introduction to the senior members of the institute. But since she's been in Ireland from 2008 onwards, and just comes once a year or so, so many of those who have joined IMSC after 2008 may not know her. So she describes herself as a poet and a creative facilitator. She was also extremely lively presence in IMSC and the staff housing, where anybody who was around Lilavati at that time would remember fondly her Christmas parties, where she would invent all kinds of games to keep us occupied, including like surprise gifting to everyone, but with the ceiling that it shouldn't cost more than 50 rupees.
5 rupees.
Whatever, yeah.
That was in those days.
That was really challenging because you find a gift to give to someone which is less than 5 rupees. But the point is you wouldn't know who this gift will go to. So I ended up receiving all kinds of crazy gifts. And in turn, I'm sure people got similarly crazy gifts from me. But more seriously, Fiona's her secret identity is that of a poet. Or it's the other way around maybe. So she has previously given workshops in a number of places like IIT Madras, the Irish Writers Centre, Intercultural Language Services in Dublin, Sai University in Chennai, Salman Poetry in Ireland, Yoda Press in Delhi. So she works with the Tipperary Education and Training Board in Ireland and with the Pearse Cent Library in Dublin. So she has published 2 collections of poetry, and I carry them in my hand actually. These are my personal copies. A Compound of Words, which was published in 2019 by Yoda Press, and Love in the Original Language, which is published quite recently, 2022 by Salman Poetry. I think there was another one, right, which was illustrated by Vani.
Much older, yeah. So that's Geometry of Love Between the Elements.
Yeah, so Geometry of Love Between the Words.
Elements.
Yeah, Between the Elements, which was actually was illustrated by our faculty member Vani. So, and then she has co-edited All the Worlds Between, which was published by Yoda Press in 2017, and Dubilon, published by ILS and TCC in 2023. So that's the most recent of your books.
Yeah.
And Kin, Roma, Traveler and Nomadic Women's Writing is going to come out from Salman Poetry in 2024, which lets me to also tell you that Fiona has been working with the gypsies in Chennai for a very long time when she was here. In fact, she's very fluent not only in Tamil but also in Vaigiri, the language used by the gypsies here. So she has many guises, and it's a pleasure to invite her to be the In Conversation speaker for this month. So today's format would be somewhat different from the format we have used so far. So unlike, having a 30-minute talk followed by discussions, what we will have is 3 chunks of poetry reading. So she has divided into 3 groups of poems. So the first block of poems would, maybe you'll describe it, Yeah. So and the idea is to have the discussions in between those chunks of poems. So it will not be like talk and then followed by questions, but poetry reading, questions, poetry reading, questions, and so on. All right. And last but not the least, at the end of this, we have high tea arranged in the other end of the corridor. All right. So welcome, Fiona, to the...
First of all, thank you so much for organising this. It wasn't simple and straightforward. Even the layout, I kind of changed it around. So thank you so much for your patience and forbearance. Thank you all for coming. And I will try to make the next hour before you get teas and coffees and snacks as painless as possible and as swift as possible. So just sit back and relax. And I'm really looking forward to your questions because Having lived with physicists and mathematicians and computer scientists for many years, it did kind of end up, when I started writing, quite a bit of it ended up in my poetry. So the first chapbook was Geometry of Love Between the Elements, which of course looked at geometry and love and how that might come together. So without further ado, I will start with the first section, which will be poetry which uses scientific language. So thinking about language and the ideas, how science is, to me, science is like a language of its own. And how can we use that language to talk about other things in life? So for me, mathematics is people trying to use numbers and the ideas of mathematics to describe the world around them and the way in which things interact in that world. How would it look to take some of those ideas and map them onto maybe emotions or human interactions? So that's kind of what I've done. So here we go. I have a couple of other things I could say, but look, let's just get on with the poetry. So the first poem I have is called A Lancaster Plays with Quantum Reality. And I don't know if any of you have read Amitabh Ghosh, but he introduced me to this word Lancaster. So the idea was that in Shanghai, you had this place where people would come together and do business. So some people spoke Mandarin, some people spoke Hindustani as it was then, some people spoke this, some people spoke that. But how would all these people work together to do business? And there was a big problem because if I learn Mandarin, well, then I'm always going to be at a slight disadvantage. And the person, speaking, if somebody learns English, then they're going to be at a slight disadvantage, or possibly not, but, that perception. So a Lancaster was the person who would be able to connect the two languages or to kind of do the translation. And I prefer this idea to the idea of translation because translation suggests moving something from here to there, whereas language is almost like between us, and it exists between us. So the words that you may not know would be lob pigeon, and pigeon in this context means business. So lob pigeon will be love business. And I'm sure I don't, in this environment, have to explain ishq or pyar, so I won't even bother. So it's wonderful to be in a place where I don't have to translate everything. So a Lancaster plays with quantum reality. We are doing lob pigeon, lobbing our words back and forth. You ishq mine, and I pyar yours. Back and forth we lob these loves. Each time they fly back and forth, they exist in me and you. I cannot hold all the words in my head, or even all of one word. Right now, a little piece of this exists inside your head. So the quantum physicists in the room can explode and then come back with questions. Then the other thing I did, which was really bratty of me, was to take calculus. So I have always been fascinated by differential calculus. Unfortunately, I didn't quite understand it the first time around, and I've been trying to figure it out ever since. But there were certain aspects of it which just completely fascinated me. And I became a little bit obsessed, and I found a book which was like a beginner's guide or an idiot's guide to calculus. But it was written sometime in the early 1920s, I think. So I've taken quotes from that and played around with them. So it's called Differential Calculus for Lovers. And this is the fourth section. This is the quote. We classify all quantities into two classes, constants and variables. In calculus, we are dealing with rates of growth. What effect on the process of differentiating is caused by the presence of constants? Skin is the largest organ, plays pleasure through the body when tuned in the right hands. Skin is an organ of delight spread all over, holding nerves poised for joy, wanting only to be touched. Skin is an organ so close to orgasm, waiting for fingertips to touch where desire spills from the pores, each cell, a symphony whose rhythm comes from deep inside. Section 5. On true compound interest and the law of organic growth. Your hard cell has forced my hand. I have paid the price which you demand. 6. On different degrees of smallness. The sum of dx. The sum of all the little bits of x. Do many minutes add up to a whole lot. 8. Integrating as the reverse of differentiating. The integral of something is the whole. What of those who do not wish to integrate, who cherish a desire to be separate? She must collect the pieces, the leftovers, make something of them. There is a beauty in smallness. Mosaics are not the sum of tiny pieces, they are more. The beauty is brokenness, reflecting light in unpredictable ways. 9. On the incalculability of differential rates of unrelated variables. I should have known a book on calculus, the maths of change, the calculation of relationships between two variables did not bode well, nor did Sylvanus, slippery god character who emerged from one culture adopted by others and twisted to their meanings. It was a simple sum from the start. We are dealing with small quantities. When we vary them, we get more. We vary trying to find the ratio of change, but that is only possible in related variables. 10. Introducing a useful dodge. Sometimes one is stumped by finding that the expression to be differentiated is too complicated to tackle directly. This is an Emily Dickinson quote. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. She does not state the angle of the slant, but that at which the morning light reaches the pillow where he never slept is probably the correct figure here. 11. Geometrical meaning of differentiation. The slope of a curve at a point is, however, a perfectly defined thing. It is the slope of a very small portion of the curve situated just at that point, and we have seen that this is the same as the shape of the tangent at the curve at that point. In my dreams, love, pleasure, pain, disgust are perfectly defined. There are no boundaries around them, no spill, no overflow. In my copybook, the curve is neatly drawn, hangs delicately between the axes, untouched. In geometry, I learn how slope varies. Only by pinpoint focus can the equation be written, capturing the exact differential. The tangent, where it touches, shares with the curve a ratio which will, at every other point, keep them apart. And now it's your turn. Questions?
So I'll just set the ball rolling, saying, asking you, you've interacted a lot with physicists, maths, computer scientists here. So do you see any difference in the creative process in sciences versus the arts? No. So, for example, what's your take on the two cultures debate?
Thank you so much for a brilliant question, Sithabra, and one which I actually think I have an answer to. So one of the things that struck me over the years was that when I would hear, I wasn't a poet when I lived in Chennai, by the way, at least I was, but I didn't realize it. I was writing, and I only realized when I got back to Ireland that I had these notebooks full of poems. But when I was here, I didn't know I was writing, which sounds a bit strange. But I remember listening to people talking about mathematical problems and ideas, and it just struck me that when I write poetry, I write it to try and understand something. I'm interested in something. It's a problem I want to solve. It's something that I think I could make something beautiful with something of that. So Michael Ondaatje says, I'm like a blind lover. I do not know what I love until I write it down. And so I think I'm somewhat similar. It's in the writing process that I understand something. And I think for mathematicians and physicists, there's this fascination with something and an idea that I can take that and maybe there's a beautiful solution. Maybe I can make something beautiful with this. And I think it's that notion of order and an aesthetic almost, as well as a wanting the truth. And I think in poetry also, we're in search of the truth as well, whatever it is for that moment. And the poem, as it lands, when it's being played with, when it's being organized, when it sits on the page, there's something beautiful. And when it's finished, you can kind of put it aside and then it's no longer of interest because it's done and it's on to the next one, the next problem, the next thing to be solved, the next thing that you might find something beautiful there. Does that make sense?
So in that connection, like most scientific papers are completely unreadable. Like I think we all agree that physical review letter is one of the worst cases of writing ever. So do you think like creative writing is a skill that necessarily the graduate students of science should learn? Or is it like that science is such a specialized, or science is such a specialized language that, writing skill is not really something that we should emphasize upon? Because this is a debate that has been going on for a while in the institute.
So I would say, yeah, but what I think because there is poetry which is unreadable, and there is prose which is, and there's literature. I'm sure you've all picked up some novels and gone, this is completely unreadable. So there are things which seem unreadable to us. I'm sure you find papers, in your specific areas readable. It is somebody from outside who finds them unreadable. So there is a movement, the plain English movement, and that idea would say, can you write it down as simply as possible? And so sometimes I do a lot of editing work, and sometimes people, they recite a wonderful poem and then they put it on the paper, and it just doesn't, I think of it as kind of like bouncing a ball. You have this beautiful thing, you throw it onto the page, and it should bounce off the page and land in the other person's mind with something of a similar kind of vibe. But I think with the paper, if it's landing with other physicists or mathematicians or whatever, is that, who's your audience? And if what you're writing reaches your audience, then is that okay? But I think creative writing is such a broad term. I would be more inclined to say plain English. And are you saying the same thing in 3 different ways? Is it necessary to use a word that means the same thing as the word before? And, is that necessary? And can we just speak in plain English? That would be kind of where I would go with that.
Well, I mean, I know of someone who, this is a scientist I won't name, not from ILSC.
Well, that person is leaving at the back.
No, so what happened was he was giving an extremely bad talk, because in the sense nobody understood anything. So one of my students came out of his talk saying that the first person I met whose native language is PRL.
Yeah.
He was speaking in this very terse, completely non-understandable sentences.
Yeah.
So, each sentence would require, like a complete notes to understand what he meant.
And maybe the thing with somebody like that is they need an editor. Somebody who sits with, like Homi Bhabha. I don't know if any of you have read Homi Bhabha's texts, the third space. Anybody read Homi Bhabha? No? Yeah. Yeah, it's a generational thing maybe. He won a prize for the most unintelligible kind of academic at some point. So, but the thing is, if you actually read his interviews or you hear him speak, he's amazing. He just lights up a room and everything he says makes complete sense. It's only when he feels obliged to talk in this incredibly complex language of academia. And I mean, English literature in academia, the language can be really hi-fi. And that's completely unintelligible. So maybe what this person needs is to sit down and have a conversation with somebody, and somebody else to take notes and translate it. Just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at another. So maybe some people are good at thinking things up, and other people need to help them edit their work and get it onto the page. Back to the bouncing ball, they may have the ball in their hand, they may be able to throw it down, but maybe it just doesn't bounce. So you need an editor to maybe help.
Right. Eating? So by the way, all of you are free to ask questions. I mean, don't think that just because I have the mic, I have the...
Yeah. No, everybody should be asking questions. In fact, we will be noting who doesn't ask questions, and there will not be any bondas for those who do not ask questions. So anybody want a bonda? Yeah. Yeah, please, we have a question.
I noticed that since you're perhaps an outsider to mathematics or whatever you are talking.
Completely.
So I guess you would also use the language of math or physics in a subversive manner, which doesn't happen within sciences at all, I suppose. Like science was a subversive force once upon a time when the religion had sway, I suppose. But today science is the religion. And we don't do subversion at all here. That's what I think. But I think somebody like you coming from outside would use the language of science to sort of obliquely prick at it or look at the world in a subversive way, which is very refreshing. So do you think about it like that actively? Or
Well, yes. And I think poetry is kind of a very polite and people don't generally think of poets as political activists, but there's quite a lot of incredibly powerful work that we can do in language, and that's what I work in. Mathematicians might think about numbers and theories of that nature, but for me, it's language. Laws are written in language. Judgments are made in language. We are oppressed because here we are, and we're all speaking in English. That's, I'm Irish, so it's a whole colonial thing. So language itself is a tool of oppression. So I think it's a matter of kind of grabbing the end of that stick and kind of yanking it and maybe turning the stick into a flute and playing that flute like a murulidar, So let's, what can we do? So I think each one of us has the potential. I was just saying to somebody, my next project is rewriting the Irish Constitution. And when I say that, people kind of go, what? It's like, well, why not? And I think it's about dreaming. And I think that's what scientists have in common with poets and writers, is that it's that ability to dream. All that, what we lack, I can't remember who said it, but whoever did, African-American writer, it'll come back to me. But what we lack is imagination. Let's think about how things could be different. And why are they not different? And let's posit that difference. And, and let's see how maybe we can start thinking about moving there. But if we don't even have that dream, then we can never move to that place. So the dream of a common language, to quote Henry and Rich, the dream of mathematical papers, science papers, that could be accessible to the general public, that there will be such a high level of education that kids in school, every kid would think, I can be a scientist. I would have loved to have been a mathematician, but in my day, girls in my school, we had such a bad quality of mathematics teacher that you got lost in the first few months of the final course. So I never got to differential calculus for that reason. And I feel robbed of it. And I would love to see every kid having access to the knowledge that all of you have access to.
So I was curious about in the second poem that you read, you sort of repurposed some quotes from a textbook you mentioned, right?
Yeah, I can give you the name of the textbook because that would be the right thing to do. Yeah, no, you talk. I'll just find this. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was curious, the specific choices of quotes that you use. What was sort of the kind of the guiding kind of flavor? Was it just how the words sounded, or was it? I mean, because to an outsider, they probably wouldn't get the context as the first, right? So maybe it's just like the words, how the words sort of sound together, or maybe the feelings that the words invoke, or I mean, the words themselves, of course, have some meaning, right? So I'm just curious, what was it that sort of guided you to choose these particular sort of words?
Okay, so the quotes all came from one book. And that book is actually open access. It's available online, and it's called Differential Calculus for Beginners, and it was published in 1896. And it is the most readable textbook I have ever come across on differential calculus. I see people smiling. Have you read this book? No? Okay. It's an amazing book. But it's actually readable. And I do love the idea that the tinier things are, that just fascinates me. The idea that you can think about quantities and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and they never disappear. But our lives are like that as well. Like this time that we're spending together, this is how many minutes and in our whole lives. Some of us, hopefully not, but you never know when you're going to be dead. And time is such a precious resource. And how do we spend it? And those seconds. But those seconds that we spend with somebody, even the guy that you see on the road every day because he happens to be in a job that means he crosses going the other way. And that random second that you meet that person. But over a long time, years and years and years, how does that build up? How does that relationship build up? And so that's the kind of thing that I get obsessed by. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Sure. No, but
yeah.
but you chose some specific quotes. You
yeah.
put them in a certain order as well. I suppose.
Yeah.
So I mean, what was your kind of thought process?
Thinking?
Yeah. What was your thinking in like?
I suppose it's a lyric sequence is the whole piece. And the first one was called "To Deliver You from the Preliminary Terrors," which kind of won me over to that guy. And so I kind of thought about what's the most crazy thing you could do with differential calculus. And of course, you could apply it to love. I mean, who talks about different? Maybe people do. Maybe I'm just not in the loop. Are you all using differential calculus to figure out your relationships? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Well done. Well, I mean, Nivedita's amazing, and you're so happy. So, well, maybe that's what we should all be doing. Yeah. So, so that's what I did. I kind of took quotes that I felt that really interested me, that kind of made sense to me, and that I could kind of, answer back. And then I answered them back in different ways. So for instance, we classify all quantities into two large classes, the constants and the variables. So then that's what brought me to thinking about skin, and skin being the largest organ. We don't even think of skin as an organ. And if you ask people about sex, they'll just get straight into, genitalia, and they don't even think about skin. But when you think about it, in any form of sensuality, skin is the beginning, the end, and the middle of it. And yet from the moment of birth, skin is where it's at. And we have a new skin every 7, like skin is fascinating. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
Thank you.
And maybe then we'll go on to the next section. But if you have a question that you didn't get to answer in this round, keep it and we'll do the next round. Yeah.
This is probably a question that should have been asked at the end of the session. Are you fascinated by any other science than the mathematical sciences, like life sciences?
Well, actually, if we get to it, and if you're all brave enough, we will. I can read you my poem about Linnaeus' taxonomy. That also fascinates me. So yeah, we can. Yes. I'm fascinated by so many things.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the second.
Yes, we'll go on to the second one. But for all those millions of you who want bondas, and we are making notes, you are being recorded. Big Brother is watching you. And Deepti, have you got a note? Everybody, yeah. Otherwise, I'm getting all the bondas because I'm doing more talking. Okay, here we go. So the second part is I call myself a plurilingual poet. And everyone's like, what's that? Why can't you say bilingual? Well, the truth is, despite what Siddhartha said, and he's not a liar, he's just very kind. I only speak one language kind of fluently, and that's English. I speak bits of Irish and French and German and Polish and Arabic and Tamil, tiny bit of Hindi/Urdu, and Kannada and anything else. Yeah. Anyway, and a bit of Turkish. I'm trying to learn Turkish at the moment. So so plurilingual means using all of the words rather than having to be multilingual, which means you speak everything fluently, or bilingual, which is 2 languages fluently. Plurilingual suggests you just take all the words and mush them all up together and see what happens, which is kind of what I do. And it gives everybody permission to use a word that maybe you don't speak that language fluently, but you kind of know, like chumma. How do you translate chumma? So, and then of course, if you're speaking to Hindi speakers, it's like, you mean kiss? No. Chumma is totally different to chumma. Yeah. So just that I know that Srinivas speaks Hindi. You shouldn't have sat in the front, see? Great respect. So, so the words I'm looking at in this, so I say here, my official thing is, or a word in a particular language untranslated can act as a trigger. So sometimes it's fun not to translate words. Sometimes it's fun to play with the fact that words can have, 2 different meanings, even though it's the same. It sounds the same. So I'm going to, without further ado, read you a poem called Patambuchi. For those of you who don't know, it doesn't matter. Well, actually it does. Patambuchi is Patam is a kite and Puchi is an insect. So Patambuchi is, and nobody who speaks Tamil, I suppose, anyway, it's a butterfly. So I probably don't need to translate that for most people in the room. So I walk the street with scissors grasped in my pocket. I lop chunks of fabric off discarded inside out and broken umbrellas. My plan is to sew the pieces together, coat them with a waxy fantasy, then using old belts attach my willow basket, and climbing in I fly away. In my dreams the balloon bursts and each patch becomes a patam, and I'm borne aloft by butterflies. And without that word, I never would have had that idea. Now, whether or not me having that idea is of any benefit to anybody anywhere in the world, I don't know. But I like the poem. It makes me happy. Because, people throw away umbrellas in Ireland, and it really bugs me. Because there used to be a guy who'd sit over in Mylapore and he'd mend your umbrellas. I don't know if he's still there, but good guy. The forefront of the recycling movement. And the other word is katumaram. And again, this was written during COVID. I want to write you a poem of wood and water, the forest and the sea. I stare into Dunleary Harbour, luminous blue air, tinkle of boats on waves, all wood and water, sun on sea, gold and blue. Then I see them in the Bay of Bengal. They stand on water, shadows of men so far away. Generations have found whispering trees to strip and bind. On these they search for fish, life and limb on logs. And I am here with you, painting their image in words. How wood and water meet in the miracle of catamaran. You dream of travel rooted in your forest. And for those of you who don't know, katu is to tie and maram is trees. So catamaran, the word in English, comes from the Tamil word. And the last one is Arabic. So those of you who don't speak Arabic, I'll just give you a little translation so you can have that there. So the first word is mojudia. So ana mojud means I am here. So mojudia is like existentialism or, existing. And the next word you might want help with is wahid. So wahad is one, and wahid is alone. Wahida, I think, is lonely, but I stand to be corrected. Then there's which means is like mother. So Tawfiq would be the mother of Tawfiq. And then fatwa is an opinion. And then the last word is al-ummah, which is like the global worldwide community of Muslims. Catholics would talk about the church, the Roman, I don't know, the Holy Roman Catholic Church or something. Yeah, so anyway, they are the words. And I was in a workshop, I was thinking about things. These words were the words that I remembered after 30 years. And using these words, I was able to write about my friend and his experiences. So this is written with his permission. Translated from a Libyan life in Ireland. Mawjudia. The room is cold. The rising light cuts through my sleep. I boil the kettle, make coffee black enough to dissolve my memories. Daytime, I sit in Bewley's, drink sweetness with women of a certain age, talk politics, read papers. Evening finds me at the bar in Whelan's, with out-of-training newshounds busy lapping pints, yapping as the news flickers by. Most nights I like to dance. I swing, samba, salsa, movement under cover of darkness, my natural element. And in dead of night, I'm woken by the distant past. I turn on the radio. The crackle distorts the silence. I had heard others die, a blow-by-blow account. But when my sister died, there was no transmission. Not a whisper did I hear of her. Wahid. Maybe it was prison life, but I could not sleep alone. The American, she did not understand. She raged, raided my room, shredded my clothes, left me bare. The girl I wanted to, but she was young, too young to bother when I cheated, laughed it off and walked away. And I was left alone to cook for one, alone with the world news. The nights were long and dark and stretching. 3. Tawfiq. I have your face here in my hands. My tribal markings are deeper, invisible ley lines in my soul. I've destroyed my papers, letters, lovers, photos many times, but yours I've treasured. Ya Mamma, my departure shamed you. Come to me now, that I may give you a hero's welcome. Salamat, salamat, salamat. Fatwa. I buy the book. I have not read Quran in many years, but if this man is under threat of death for speech and I have suffered for my belief, I want to see, to understand. The words are like prods, nerves, long, numb, communicate pain to me. Organs I have lived without begin to quiver, cleanse my blood, remove the toxins from my brain. I clearly see the man's mistake. These people I had sided with against my own, they will not mock their holy books. But mine they'll tear apart, and I am torn apart. 5. Al-Ummah. Pulled too thin, I became see-through. Their embrace made me solid, matter once more. Under cover of her darkness, I found a quiet place to settle myself, return to childhood, unbroken sleep.
So while the others are warming up for their bonda, let me ask you a question.
You and I are going to get all the bondas.
So, like your use of words which, per se wouldn't be understandable to a reader makes me wonder, like, what you think the function of poetry is. Like, you're trying to express something which is very personal, which presumably cannot be actually expressed in language by using words which are actually, in some sense, not understandable to me. So, are you trying to break across the comprehensibility barrier by trying to use unintelligible words per se to express what is unexpressible? What is your opinion on that?
Okay. So first of all, everybody has met Google Translate. There are very few languages, but actually the book that I'm bringing out at the end of September is one of the few books that you will not be able to use Google Translate for because it's Roma, Romani, Romani Chal. So it's all these languages which are not available through Google Translate. But most languages nowadays, you can either take a photo, if it's written in Arabic, for instance, you can take a photo of it on Google Translate. You're all the scientists, you know this. It's so easy. So there's no such thing as a word that, you can't translate. It's just a word you don't know. But if I use a Bengali word, which somebody else won't know, you will read the poem and you go, there's something in here for me. So there's something very comforting when the person obviously that this poem is about is Libyan and his first language is Arabic. So for that person to find those words in that poem says something for him. And for other people who speak Arabic, they'll look and they'll see. Just like, with the Patambuchi or the Katumaram or whatever. So they're not actually written in Tamil. So at the back of the book, there's all the translations. So that's one thing. Then the other thing I think is that, okay, here's my little science lesson. So I think the world is this shape, okay, global. And I think that on the surface, everything looks very different. I wake up in the morning, I look out, I know I'm in Chennai because it looks like Chennai. I know I'm not in Dublin because Dublin looks very different. So on the surface, people there speak differently. Maybe people dress differently, look different slightly. Not everybody, but and in Chennai maybe. So things look very different from one side to another. But if we go down, down, down at the heart of the globe, we have magma. And so I kind of think in my very crazy way that the deeper we go into ourselves and into the truth of who we are, the closer we are to reaching that magma, which is what we actually have in common. So if I told you, what I have done for the last week, you'll all probably go, it's so boring. Now, maybe you're already going, things are so boring, but when I talk to you about something really powerful that has happened in my life or something that's really impacted on me, then the chances are that something will resonate with you in a way talking about the general things don't. Does that make sense? Thank you for your head nods. You all get bondas. Nodding heads get bondas too. But no, so yeah. And if you have any questions, yeah. Well, I hope there are too, because otherwise I'm going to get lynched.
Bondas is just a code word for any snack. Yeah.
Well, but we should be very specific here because we're talking about specificity as universality in a way. So.
Nobody will lynch you. Everybody will lynch me because I'm in charge of organizing this stuff.
And Lynch, by the way, you know where the word Lynch comes from? It's an Irish surname. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah?
David Lynch, a filmmaker, I remember.
Yeah, no. To lynch somebody is actually to kill them. It's to tie them up and hang them from a tree. And it's actually something that an Irish origin police officer did in the southern United States. And so that term lynching, that's where it actually comes from. So in fact, when we use that, when I bring that word into the room, imagine what history I'm bringing into the room. So, and yet I used it so lightly. So I'm glad you pointed out that maybe not everybody's familiar. David Lynch is amazing. But yeah, so that's where the word, so it's even just in a sentence, what are we bringing into the space? And what wisdom is there, what love is also there in language, so it can be the way to create so much hatred, but it can also, I think, be a way to create great love. And by love, I mean justice, as in the words of Cornel West, Tenderness is what love looks like in private. Justice is what love looks like in public. So, speech over. Sorry.
So, there's a very interesting book called Physics as Metaphor, which kind of, refers to the idea that our theories or rather tries to stress the fact that physics is not the description of the world as it actually is, but the best approximation that we have of the way the world we think is working. And, your use of words reminds me of the fact that some poet once famously said that poetry is a very inadequate way of expressing through an inadequate tool, i.e. language, about our most innermost feelings, for which we didn't actually design language. Language was for communicating things like, let's go to hunt, or let's share this food, not about, what I feel about you.
Well, we don't know that.
Well,
And language, every day, every time we speak, we are changing language. Every time you hold a word in your mouth and you release it, you in some way have impacted on that word. So, I don't know, because language is what we create together, and we have some power in how the language around us is, or the people who are around us, how they speak, and how we interact with one another. We may not always feel that power, and there may be people who are trying to take that power away from us. But I think that's, yeah.
Do you see is there any connection between the kind of poems that you spoke earlier, which were manifestly related to science, but this set of poems seem to describe just a friend of yours? So is there a connection to science here as well?
Okay, no, there's no connection to science, but there's a connection to language. And if science is written in language, and so let's just say science, but yeah. And so what I was trying to get at with these poems was how a specific word, if we look at that word, so I looked at science as a language in the other poems. Here it's like, if we take a specific word, what can we find out by going into the etymology, almost the scientific, looking at the word scientifically, breaking it down, seeing where it comes from. So you've like Patam and Fuchi, like why, yeah, and so on.
So once, like when we start writing a poem, we usually think only in one language. Usually, when I want to write an English poem, I only will think of an English word. So, for your like idea of like plurilingual sounds like good, but I don't know how to think about it like spontaneously as how you want to write in a single language. So
you get two bondas, because you have just brought up the question, which moves me on to my next section. So maybe I'll just go on to the next section. And that is language as play, because it can sound all very serious. We're talking about science, and we're talking about individual words and the etymologies and all of that. But this third section is kind of language as play. Has anybody here ever looked at or ventured near a book called Finnegan's Wake, written by a guy called James Joyce? Great. Okay. Just, could you give me one sentence, a really honest sentence on Finnegan's Wake? No, on what you think, your response to it. And you get two bondas. God, how I have to bribe people. Thank God for the bondas.
I haven't read the book, but
if you said you'd read the book, I would probably go, yeah, right, okay.
I've picked up the book.
Yes.
Okay, so it's okay. Obviously, incomprehensible is one that comes to mind, but perhaps I would say it's a bit of I would say it's a puzzle.
Yes, a puzzle. Yeah, or a problem. Getting back to our mathematical, scientific, brilliant. Thank you so much. And you were the first one? No? And go on. Give us a sentence. Go on.
Friend question, if you like.
Okay.
But that.
Okay. So what I wanted to do was, I hadn't read Finnegan's Wake. I managed to get through my entire college career in English literature without reading Finnegan's Wake. And it was only just prior to COVID that somebody befriended me on Facebook. You should never befriend strangers on Facebook. Don't talk to strangers. What your parents told you was very true. So this guy is a professor of English over in Rutgers in Philadelphia. And he's a member of a thing called the Moonstone Collective, and he's excited about Finnegan's Wake and jazz music and the relationship between the two. And by the way, Fiona, you're into plurilingualism, blah, 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 blah. we'd like you to write a piece on this section of Finnegan's Wake. And I'm like, what? The print is even too small for me. So I blew it up. I highlighted certain bits, and some of the language in it was just so mind-blowingly amazing. I'm going to send you a link to a recording of this section through Sitabra, and you can listen to it. But it's just amazing. So I'm going to actually break with whatever I said I was going to do and do this now. Here it is. So Finnegan's Wake. So I got told many, many times when I went back to Ireland and I started writing and I published this book and I would submit poems, why are you using these funny words? Why are you using foreign words in English? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, it's just me. I'm crazy. I've come from India and I'm still thinking in all these words. I should learn to write only in English, And then I found Finnegan's Wake and I'm like, hang on a minute. This guy is like God for you people. And you're giving out to me. Giving out is an Irishism. It actually means to scold. It comes from the Irish language where we say tuairte amach, which literally means giving out, and it means to scold. So So they started giving out to me and I said, well, Finnegan's Wake. So, compound of words, full of different words. Finnegan's Wake, my argument to all those people who say plurilingual poetry, mixing up the words is wrong. One piece I've just found recently is, I have to go and do a bit more research, but I think he actually started rewriting the Constitution, because at the very beginning of the Irish Constitution, it says, in the name of God the Almighty, and then it goes on and on. And he has written, because he had a little bit of Turkish, in the name of Anna the All-Maziful. And those of you who know Turkish will recognize Anna is mother, and Mazi is history. So in the name of Anna the All-Maziful, and then he goes on to talk about the Mama Festa. So we keep writing manifestos. So Joyce was suggesting manifestos. So you can see how he's playing with language. So this was my interpretation of that piece that I did for that random person who got in touch with me on Facebook. And just to warn you, there's a poem in between. And the poem in between, you'll know when I'm reading that poem because I'll stand over here. So these are not my words. And when I'm reading my words, I'll stand over here. And a couple of the words I've stolen from Joyce, but anybody who wants can have this and they're highlighted so you can see which ones I stole. And so don't worry about the meaning. This is fun. This is like you're at a jazz concert. You don't have to figure out anything. You just sit back and enjoy the meaning, the sound of the language. Night marching, dark digging, shadow searching, moon craving, drunk brawling, spunk spraying, hand laying, slap placing, stand swaying, dance singing, hug raving. Footing it. A fitly fearless force flounce over Anna Livia at Houston Bridge, bored teens in June, July, a gathering of gadabouts gallivanting to the gates of Fiendish Park, a sinistrous place to enter by night. Left of the Liffey as you row from the Lizard to the sea, the rightly Deer Park refuse them, they do not enter the Dream Hotel, a kip, head to their gaffs. Bury me over in Dublin, under St. James's Gate, where Ma Baker held sway till she was swept away by the never-doubting Thomases, believing in the liberties, equalities, and civil anties, yes, Burhoods, commie unities, and lefty togethers, where tides change over time, where the ebb and flow of crime washes up at the park gates, drowning beneath Kalapani, or rising from the flames, depending, upending, some never-ending. Forgive me quick and let me out of here. With the smell of the porter in every quarter, from the barges coming home late, child sits astride lap of legionary, legendary grandaunt, gold hooped and tressed, trust in corset tied in pearl, scent of cigarettes and soda bread, wafts through Sallymount Terrace in Wren Alad, the Maldor kept at bay by bleaching, landlord Judy packed a punch till grandame packed her bags. And when Gabriel sounds his last trumpet, to summon the dead ones out, ford of Hurdlestown, river crossed by many men again, O'Donovan, Rossa, Grattan, O'Connell, to the triumvirate of Praise be Beckett, Joyce, O'Casey, Father Matthew stopped the drink, until by brink one ship, Rosie Hackett made a racket, finally got heard, but still she fights to win some rights. Blow cold, blue bagged, wind blown, no home, no footpaths, on footpaths, missteps caught between cracks, no crack. The sky's the limit rents, developers rolling over the city while owning Keegan holds the keys and more streets. And they come in their shores from distant shore. They come in their scores from distant shores. Honey fall shay to the buzzing and guzzling, the babbling and gabbling, the blibbering and gibbering, the mush and the mash of us, the swish and the swash of us, the forward rush and the backward wash of us, the hojame lean to the face of us, the inge earwig alarum of us, the natne hona of us. In Osprey, we stick our tongues out, doubling, tripling, purifying our city. Sure, I'll have time for a bottle of stout. And just to give you that in-between poem altogether. Bury me over in Dublin, under St. James's Gate, with the smell of the porter in every quarter from the barges coming home late. And when Gabriel sounds his last trumpet to summon the dead ones out, and they come in their scores from distant shores, and try to have time for a bottle of stout. So just on the theme of playing with language, I will just give you 2 more. Oh, no, I won't actually. I'm just going to stop there. Oh no, I'll do compounded words and then we'll... Yeah, but we don't have enough formulas to bribe them for more than an hour. Okay, the last one is a compound of words, which was kind of the first poem I wrote, mixing all the words. What you're looking at is what they say in Dublin, which means, what are you looking at? And if somebody says that to you, you run. Usually it's a kind of, what you looking at? So that's what you're looking at means. You all know the meaning of the word Maya. You all know Salah, its various meanings. And you all know Arivangani, and that's it, okay? And Arivangani is this thing. You're looking for a tight slap. In Dublin, we say, are you cruising for a bruising? We like to rhyme. Yeah, we're so sweet. Very nice people. A compound of words. Try to atomize what you're looking at. Imagine each letter a string supplying a side way to transubstantiation, avoiding the black hole of a lemon market, the consonants shifting, the click of the Q Celtic fossils trickle down through the generations. Do you know it's all Maya? And we, Sana, must do penance. Arivangani as you cruise for a bruise. Crushed together, we make juice. Thank you all. Do you want the very last one? Okay, you want the last one? Okay, sure. Okay, so the very last poem is yeah. He just wants the sex poem. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to have to do it just for Sithapra's sake, you know. So this one is called From Science to Sex in 6 Easy Steps. That kind of rhymes.
Everyone will want to hear it.
Yes.
So
So basically, it's my take on Linnaeus' taxonomy. But I would like to point out that I didn't know, but seemingly there's a lot of very racist terms, surprise, surprise, in Linnaeus' taxonomy. And there's actually a big meeting of botanists and botanical scientists at the moment to remove the racist terminology. But I think you'll enjoy. This is not racist terminology. This is just hilarious. You never knew plants could be so sexy. Okay. The taxonomy of Linnaeus, like the rest of us, has its origins in sex, or sexual organs at least, from the massive Puscopia, grey, cunthead or pisspot whale, to the tiny labia minor earwig, and clearly rather sexy bear, Ursus fornicatus magnus, to the overexcited scientific reaction to a shell, vulva, vulva, vulva. Freud would have enjoyed interviewing the person who named a mollusk Penisculus penis and an orchid Orchis mastula. I kid you not, guys. But let's face it, Georgia O'Keeffe painted flowers rich and textured we could recognize as part of us perhaps more clearly than our own vaginas in a lineup, cunts in a call-out, quims in a queue. Imagine the man who would not know his own to see, but we know by touch, by feel, but sight. And my friend tickled her courgette flower with stamens when the bees were few. That year, the courgettes grew as big as babies.
So again, let me warm up the audience for questions by asking, so
Think of the bondas. Think of the bondas, guys. You're almost there.
Fiona, I'm now really getting scared. So anyway, what really struck me about the poems in a compound of words is how personal they are, especially when I look at things like your Allahabad poems. So in line with what you said about never talk to strangers, you are revealing your innermost feelings to strangers because you don't know who are reading your poems. So how safe do you feel?
Well, the first thing is I do know who's reading my poems because there's not many people reading them. So, yeah. That's the great thing about being a poet. Nobody reads it. And you can write what you want. So that's one thing. But to give you a proper answer, I think there's the Emily Dickinson, tell the truth, but tell it slant. So there's always the get out clause of it's the voice in the poem. And quite a lot of the time, things are kind of slightly distanced. So, but I do think when we're in a position where we can tell truths, for instance, in the Allahabadi sonnets, there's one particular line. So I lived in Allahabad for a year, by the way, guys. So I didn't just go to Allahabad for a week and write a bunch of sonnets about it. So there was a wonderful woman who was a tabla player, and she and a bunch of other women would meet every week, and they would go to either this apartment block or that apartment block, and there was a very narrow road in between. And one night she was returning. She was such a joyful person, and just, she and a dancer and a singer, they would get together and they would have so much fun. And I was kind of a bit FOMO, like I really missed out on that. But anyway, but one night she was coming back at about 10:30, and a bunch of guys came and they pulled her sari off her and they harassed her. And the two chowkidars on either side I'd say they were too scared. So as soon as the guys were gone and she was left, they went and helped her. And what really shocked me about this was the fact that the attitude of the women in the community that I knew was like, oh, what was she doing out at 10:30 at night? So the line out of that is, where is it? Woman is all powerful. Where is it now? It's there. She learns, I can't see it. Okay, so I'm going to misquote myself because I can do that. She learns woman is all powerful. She's always to blame. And, that's very personal, but I think it's an important thing to have said. So, is that...
Is this the poem you mean? She knows the tabla.
Yeah. Which one is it? No, which number is it? I can find it here. Okay, well, I read the whole thing then. Or the last line is, they rush to the victim's aid, the chowkidars, when the gundas have moved off. She learns that in these matters, woman is all powerful, always to blame. And that's not just in India, by the way, or Allahabad.
The other point that really struck me was your Annapurna Vilas.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I can. Do you want me to read that one, or I just don't want to go too much over time? Okay. Okay. So this is. You people can tell me what it's about. Annapurna Villas. The lovers sit on a moonlit balcony, eating bread and cheese with wine and olives. Enjoy the balmy evening. Below, the street sleeps in fits, mosque counting hours to the next prayer call, children lying hungry on bare floors plagued by mosquitoes, smell of raw sewage wafts up, street dogs fight over a stale chapati, neighbours tremble at the thought of such impropriety. This girl is trying to conjure a Mediterranean scene in South Asia. But first, she must learn the language. Hindi or Urdu works well here. Jinn, left over from the Mughal times, may understand and help create a protective bubble around this soft, romantic seed.
I mean, I have my own take on this, but let's see, what others have to say about this. Complete silence.
To describe the scene, whatever you painted and then calling it as a soft romantic scene is quite ironical. What do you think? You think of it as something else?
Well, I mean, what I feel is it's so personal. Sometimes I feel, like how you actually even thought of, putting such a personal scene out to the public. Is it like, they say that, like to strip yourself of all your artifices is the hardest thing to do. And, in some sense, this poem is precisely that, right? I mean, and it requires a lot of courage, I thought, to be so honest. But, that's just me.
Yeah, no, I suppose what I kind of think I'm describing, but, if the poem is yours, guys, you can do with it what you want. You don't even have to accept it as a gift. But at some level, here's this woman who's, I think 22 or something. And 30 years later, I know so much more. Thinking, I can make this into that. But, the children are lying hungry. There's all of these other complications and all of this. And yet, and then the history of the place also. So I think in a way, poetry is that thing that allows us to make of one single moment something which can contain something of the past, the present, and the future, which you're writing it from the future, looking back in a way. So it's kind of like a little machine, a little kind of time machine in some ways. Can I footnote something you said earlier about theoretical physics? I read something in a book by a guy called Mark Abley about how there is, in Aboriginal languages, because they have this concept of the dreaming time, there is actually verbs which allow them to talk about concepts which theoretical physics is dreaming of, but doesn't yet have the language to describe, because the languages in which we operate are limited in their tenses and their verbs. And yet there are a few Aboriginal languages which actually those languages have access to, would give, knowing those languages which are now dying, would give access to theoretical physicists to a different way of thinking. So
actually what he said made me think of it that knowing something about the poet makes me appreciate this poetry completely differently, let's say, from maybe what you would be thinking about. And do you think that it's important to know the poet to appreciate the poem at a completely different level?
I hope not.
Okay.
Yeah. And the Aboriginal languages? No. Okay. Yes. Excellent. Yes.
No, because the poem that you started with, actually.
The quantum physics one.
Quantum physics.
Yes.
So it's just a matter of curiosity.
Yeah.
So did you find in the quantum physics or the language that you were looking for, or when you learned about quantum physics, did that generate the ideas in your mind that led to this?
It led me, the idea that, the kind of Schrodinger's cat, that very popular kind of thing. So I did go to some online lectures during COVID and stuff. So I did do a little bit more research than just, Schrodinger's cat. Not a hell of a lot more, so please don't quiz me. Be gentle. So I loved that idea that, you don't know, and it can kind of exist in two places simultaneously. And in a way, that's what's happening with language all the time. It exists in me, and it's,
Easily.
That's how I read it.
Generate new ideas that you could come back to or
Well, in a way, isn't that, if I didn't have the language, would I have had the idea? We're back to Wittgenstein, and then the limits of our imagination and da. So, yeah.
Because I'm coming back to this Tito again. I mean, in the very personal question.
Yes.
Shitaru was saying, you're coming to India, you're learning different languages and different culture. That also sees back into...
I would never, if I had not spent all of the years I have spent in India, I would not have written any of this.
So you're interested in languages, in exploring what they are.
I think I was always interested in languages. Yeah, I think I was always interested. I mean, before I came to India, I spoke English, Irish, French, German, and Polish. So, then I picked up Hindi. Then I picked up Kannada. Then I picked up Tamil. Very badly, folks. Please do not speak to me in any, Murium, but anyway, nicht so viel. There you go, you see? So, I was in Berlin last week, so my German is still in my head. But yeah, so I think it's maybe me and my life and where I ended up and the people I met. And you, Padma, were a huge part of it all. Yeah.
I have a thought that I would like to share. Here you are a person who comes from the languages and looks at science, and then you write poetry based on that. I'm really wondering what it would be like to have a scientist thinking of the emotions in the same, or the languages in the same way, and write. Do you know of any such?
Yeah, there's a guy called Iggy McGovern, and I think he's a physicist in Dublin. And he writes poetry. He's just the first person that comes to my head, but there's loads of I'm sure there's lots of scientists. And all the scientists in this room who write poetry, because I know you're all scribbling poetry in your notebooks when you're supposed to be writing mathematical formulae. I know it. Yeah.
So Indu's question reminded me of this incident in IISc when I was a postdoc there. So I think there was a company from abroad who came to play Copenhagen, the play by Michael Frayn in NIAS, National Institute of Advanced Studies. And after the play, they had this Meet the Actors session. And so the actors came out, and someone whom several of us know very well, Joe Pashupati, immediately started them. Do you know Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? Can you explain it on the board? And so, there was this extremely funny incident because, the player said, look, we don't know anything about quantum mechanics, but we kind of were inspired by the poem, which we believe is inspired in turn by the uncertainty principle, but we ourselves have absolutely no clue, but it's a metaphor as far as we understand. So it was like a double translation, right? Michael Frayn kind of translates what he thinks is uncertainty principle into a play, and then the players are reading Frayn and, producing it in some form. So, in the end, what you get, it's very interesting to see, how a double translation kind of converts a physics idea into something which is an artistic idea. So do you feel that, when you are using this, words in some sense, this kind of translations, or what you would rather call plurilingualism, kind of imbues new meanings from what was originally, associated with these words?
Yeah, so I'm not thinking specifically in the scientific sense, but in a general sense, I think maybe it makes people think again when they hear it about the words themselves. Like, I think any of you who hear Patambuchi again, I think you hear the word so often that you forget the breakdown and etymology of it. And the same thing with Katumaram. I think we use the word all the time, Katamaran, without thinking about where it comes from and what it actually means. So I think it's just paying attention to language, and maybe it makes people think differently and different perspectives, and that's what we need, is different perspectives on these.
In the last poem, in the end you mentioned, in the last to last probably, about Dublin and Chennai.
Yeah.
Two different types of environment and everything, but if you go a bit deeper and the mantle is sort of the same and shared, do you mean the shared mantle as love? And you said love in public is softness.
Oh yeah. Love in private is tenderness, and in public it's justice. Justice is what love looks like in public. I didn't say that. Cornel West did. He's a really cool dude. Definitely read his stuff. Cornel West.
Right.
Justice is what love looks like in public. Right. Yeah.
So do you think that's the case anymore right now? You see someone in, let's say, Bombay, and someone in Delhi, and someone in Dublin, or someone in California, and is justice the same for everyone? Is it the same? For some, justice is a bit skewed. And
then is it justice? And this is the question. And in a way, if we see something which we regard as unjust, if we don't do anything about it, or if we don't call it out, or if we don't focus on it, or we don't speak about it, are we then committing an act of injustice by not calling it out? And then is that showing not love? And then if we argue for justice, is that a way of loving people? Is it enough to say, I love you, I love you, I love all people, it's just great, yeah. And then never do anything when we see injustice, when we come across injustice. And then there are all the power relations and where people are, and is it safe to speak out at a certain time, and do you sometimes have to bide your time and then speak out, and are you in a position, so it's complex.
Yeah, but is justice objectively defined? Like, is it same across the different population people?
So I would be kind of going, okay, let's get down to brass tacks here. Shall we have a look at the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and can we agree on that? And can we agree that everybody should have access to that? And on a daily basis, almost every country in the world is violating that. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which America hasn't even signed. 2 countries have not signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Somalia, which at that time was like a non-functioning state, and America, the United States of. So yeah, it's complicated, and I would agree with you. What is justice and how do we define it? But I would be starting with the UN Declaration of Human Rights and going from there. But I would also concede that nowhere has a monopoly on justice at the moment, and sadly, I'm seeing 5 minutes walk from my house, people are arriving from Gaza, and instead of welcoming people with open arms, our government has spent €145,000 putting up fences to stop people from sleeping in the tents which the government are giving them, because they're not actually allowing them to have proper accommodation. So they give them tents saying, don't sleep here. And then they spend €145,000 on barricading public, TRG, the word for the public land, Peramboke. We don't have this concept in the Irish Constitution. I want to argue that we should have Peramboke written into the Irish Constitution as a right. So Peramboke land, public land that is community owned, is being fenced off at this great expense to keep out people who are desperately fleeing wars and other, environmental consequences, which they are not responsible for, etc., etc. Yeah. So I'm not coming here to preach to anybody. I am going back home and I'm going to be arguing the case, because, there is injustice everywhere, and we need love. We need lots and lots of love.
So on that note, let me now act as Fiona's publicist and say that Fiona's books on poetry are available for sale. So her Compound of Words and Love in the Original Language. So if you'd like a copy,
they're available.
then
Yeah. So 200 and 300. A bargain price of 500 for the 2. But if you're really sweet and nice and you give up your bonda, just so Sitabra doesn't feel bad if there are no bondas, you can have them for 400. I know. So yeah. So please feel free if anybody wants to take home some poems. Otherwise, you can find a lot of them online. If you Google Fiona Bulger poetry, there's loads of them there and they're free.
yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you.
reading some of her poems. And thanks to all of you for coming here.